Hi, I'm Suzanne Giesemann, and thank you for joining me for Your Emerging Soul. This workshop is designed to help you come into alignment with your highest self. It will become very clear to you as you watch this video exactly what your highest self is. But coming into alignment is the whole reason we're here as human beings and spirit beings. When either one of those is not in balance, we tend to have a bit of pain in our lives and suffering. This workshop is designed to help you find balance in your life. And couldn't we all enjoy a little more peace and love and joy? Those are going to be the direct results of this experience for you. Now, even though you're watching a recording of a live workshop, I know that you will feel the energy that was present there because I recorded it knowing that you would be watching as well. I'm going to go into my background throughout the video, but it's important that you understand that for much of my life, I was not aware that there was a greater reality. It's only since I discovered that we are part of something far greater than ourselves that my attunement with that greater reality has truly opened up. And it was when I stepped outside of the rigid boundaries that I had put myself in through my belief system that I found that peace and that joy and that unconditional love that is everyone's birthright. That's why this course is designed in 3 modules, with each one building upon the previous one. We're going to begin now with Module 1, Getting Out of the Box, Redefining What is Real. Step by step, I'm going to take you from our basic beliefs as humans to believing in a greater reality where we can communicate with loved ones on the other side, to a reality that I never would have believed back when I wore a Navy officer's uniform that existed at all. But I'm going to give you verifiable evidence that you are part of something far greater than this physical world. I know you're going to have fun watching it, but beyond that, hopefully we'll be able to take the lid off any box that you have put yourself in so that when we move into subsequent modules, you'll be able to more and more come into alignment with who you are. Enjoy. Good evening, everybody. I love this, the home team advantage, right? So good to see everybody here. Anybody come from out of town? Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, thank you. This is the second time I gave this workshop, brand new last weekend, and it was just so well received. The whole thing is spirit guided. I have to tell you, many of you have been hearing me talk about this new information that has come through since November, and I was so excited to share it. Got to debut it last weekend and didn't change anything because it was given to me and was tweaking it right up to the last moment, and they said go. Now you're going to hear me say they a lot today and tomorrow. When I'm saying they, I'm talking about my team in spirit or anybody in spirit. They with a capital T. This workshop is called Your Emerging Soul, and that name will mean more to you as we go on because it's all about merging the human side of you with the spirit side. So it's an interesting way that Spirit had me put this together. Tonight is pure presentation. It's just storytelling, but the stories are real. Tomorrow is a little bit more storytelling and then some teaching and then more teaching, and the real ahas come tomorrow. And then tomorrow afternoon, the practical application of everything starting tonight through tomorrow afternoon. How you can apply everything that I'm sharing with you in your lives to deal with your stories. We'll talk a lot about your story and what that means. Tonight is a presentation that I call Getting Out of the Box. And the reason I decided to have this on a Friday night before we really dive into this new material on Saturday is because we need to make sure that your minds are as open as possible to this information that I'm going to share with you. And to understand that I'm talking about a greater reality that you are part of, and that it exists, and that we are inseparable from it. So what I've done is I've put together some of the biggest wows that I have personally experienced since I became aware of the greater reality, but lace them together in a way that shows you that all of this is consciousness, and we are part of that. Now, some of you because you've been with me for a while, have heard some of these stories. I know there's some people in here who have been to every one of the workshops that I give, and so you've heard bits and pieces of this. There's not a whole lot of new material in the middle of this presentation tonight, but definitely some new stuff at the end of tonight that some of you haven't heard. What made me laugh was I first presented this initial talk last year at Unity Village at a weekend-long retreat. And you know, my husband Ty, who will join us later, he couldn't be here right now, has heard all these stories. He was there when they happened to me. And yet, when I finished this presentation that you're listening to tonight, he was looking at me with this stunned expression, and he said, "That was amazing." Because of the way it's been organized and put together to just lead you along, opening your minds as we go to the conclusion, so that you go home tonight, and I hope that you're all just going to lie in bed and say, "What just hit me?" Okay? As far as the repetition, I don't mind that you've heard some of these stories before. I go back to the days when I was the aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I would accompany him to all of the speeches that he had to give. And he always included a joke in his speech. And he had speech writers to write them. And they would come in, and I'd be in his office, and he was a tough guy. And those speech writers would stand there a little nervous. How's the general going to like the speech that I told? And he'd get to the joke, and unfortunately, half the time he'd say, "Terrible joke. I don't like it. Bring in the old joke, or I'll tell my own joke." And ultimately, he always told the same joke. And the funny thing was, I never got tired of it. It was always as if it was the first time I heard that joke. I laughed hysterically. It was something in his delivery, and it was a funny joke. So some of you have heard, again, some of these stories, but I know you'll enjoy it again, all for a purpose of getting you outside of whatever box your mind has put you in regarding your place in the universe, your place in the spirit world. So I have given this a subtitle, and that is Redefining What is Real. That's the whole point of tonight, because we have this idea that what is real is that which we can sense with our physical senses, and that anything beyond that is not real. Well, that's about to change, starting tonight. I had a career with fairly limited boundaries around me. Many of you have seen pictures of me in my uniform before. Just dug my uniform out of the closet, and it's quite strange to think of how far I've come from the days when I was walking with the chairman and serving as a commanding officer and serving for the head of the Navy in highest capacities, and now, as I tell people, serving humanity in a whole different way. I sit one-on-one and connect people with loved ones who have passed. Some of you in the audience here tonight, I know that I have done readings for, and for me, there's no greater honor than sitting with someone who's lost a loved one and showing them they're right here with us. So just some of the loved ones that I have brought through are here, and last weekend I had the honor of having one of the ladies in the audience whose daughter I brought through for her. You see her here. Her name is Irene Vuvalides. I had never met Irene, but I heard from her that she was desperate. I knew she'd lost a daughter, but that's all that I knew. And she was in South Carolina, so we did the reading by phone. And I tuned in not knowing anything about her daughter, and right away was so intrigued to see her daughter in my mind's eye. I rarely see the actual spirit people, but this was a beautiful young girl with long blonde hair. And then this image popped in my mind. I said, your daughter, she's showing me she worked in education. She said, yes, she had a teaching degree. And I said, but your daughter must have worked with little black children, because I see her holding black children in her arms. Now, people who don't know me might think that I had gone on Google ahead of time and looked up her daughter by name, because later, after the reading, I went online, and that's the banner from her website, and this is her daughter, Carly, supporting one of the oldest Catholic African-American schools in the country. In fact, after Carly passed, the family started a foundation for that school in their daughter's name. So beautiful evidence right off the back. I felt Carly's presence so clearly, and one of the best things that happens in a reading is when I can describe the personality of the one who has passed to a T. How does that happen? It's because all of us are energetic beings. We are a field of love, of consciousness, and all I do is invite in those in spirit to blend their field with mine. And then it becomes really easy to just report what I'm feeling. Well, she feels absolutely lovely, loving, open, loved everyone. And oh, by the way, Irene, she's showing me a teddy bear. And she shows your nose up to this teddy bear. And Irene said, this is a bear she had since she was a child, and now I hold it, and I hold it close to get her scent. And I said, Irene, she's showing me a ring that you have on the right hand. I was glad that she was on the phone and I couldn't see, so nobody could say, well, you looked down and saw a ring, you know. So the ring on the right hand, here's a picture Irene took for me later of her hand with her daughter Carly's ring on it. Now I said, Carly had a boyfriend, and there's something about him and a mountain with a K sound, a K-sounding mountain. It turns out that her boyfriend, at the time that Carly passed, was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. It's pretty cool. Carly showed me exactly how she passed with symptoms that she had, which her mother validated, and I could tell this was getting really emotional. And I said, well, she's showing me the Bible. You're holding a Bible. But wait, it just changed. It's not the Bible. It's some other book. And this book is autographed on the left side. I remember thinking at the time, that is really a minute detail there, you know, to have a book autographed on the left. I know from signing thousands of books that most authors sign on the right side, but this was specifically on the left. Well, it turns out that Irene had this copy of Walking in the Garden of Souls, written by medium George Anderson. She carried it everywhere with her, and she called it her Bible. Oh. And in fact, George Anderson had signed it on the left side. And Irene said she had set the intention that if Carly came through, she would mention her Bible. I love when that happens. So it was a very, very healing session for Irene. She said that until that day, she had not been sleeping well. She'd had insomnia, and that healed her. But she received an even bigger healing when she came to a conference that I was speaking at last summer. And I know that some of you may have seen the video that I put on my website that I got together with Irene, got to meet her for the first time, give her a hug, and I said, come on up to my room, let's see if we can talk to Carly again. And she came through beautifully, and then my team said to me, Irene is blocked. She needs a healing. Take her hands. And I don't normally do healing work, and I know that any healing that happens is just that energy flowing through me. It's not me that does it. So I just pushed all disbelief aside, and I said, take my hands. And I held her hands, and we just sat silently. And I felt this energy just flow through my hands. And Irene later said she heard this whooshing sound and felt this energy. And we both heard at the same time, it is done. And I didn't know what had happened, but I felt she had received some kind of healing. Later on, I saw her in the hotel lobby, and she was just grinning from ear to ear. And I said, what's with you? What's happened? What's different? And she said, well, if you've watched the video, you can watch it and get the whole story. But she had continuously been reliving the moment when her daughter died in her arms. She was stuck. It was running over and over. And every time she thought of it, she felt awful. And she said, I don't know how to feel now because I'm just smiling. It's like it's okay. And I felt Carly with me just saying, now we can move on together, Mom. So a real healing for her, which is what this work is all about. And the beautiful part is that Irene has now gone on to help other parents heal by starting her own chapter of Helping Parents Heal, a bereavement group for parents who are allowed to believe in the afterlife, which makes a tremendous difference for people to know that there is more. Now, how many of you have read my book, Wolf's Message? Okay, good, you did your homework then. Excellent. So you're all familiar with Wolf, and this is the young man who came back to share with us some very important messages shared in the book. And I'm going to just tell a few things that most of you are familiar with, but he'll come up again, and especially tomorrow. The reason I was drawn to Wolf is because he was killed the same way that my stepdaughter Susan was, struck by lightning, which is rather random. The thing is, the main point about Wolf's story is that he showed that the soul knows when its time here on earth has ended, and usually in advance. That doesn't necessarily mean that our human side knows about it. I don't think our Susan knew that she was going to pass, but as you'll find out later this evening, her soul knew. So Wolf's story is wonderful because those who are skeptical read about the evidence that Wolf brought through to me in a morning visit, an early morning visit when his parents weren't even around. He showed up in my bedroom at 5:45 in the morning. My husband is getting used to these unexpected visitors and gave me just a list of things about himself that I couldn't possibly have known. It's great for skeptics because they can't say, well, you were reading body cues from his parents or you picked that up from them. They weren't even there. I knew nothing about Wolf, and yet the evidence that he gave me was then scored by his parents and then tabulated by Dr. Gary Schwartz, a afterlife researcher at the University of Arizona, who said that this morning visit with no feedback was one of the best of its kind he's ever seen. I say that only to show that this is real. That was a real visit. I think the funniest part of the whole Wolf scenario was when he drew me into the local Barnes & Noble store. In fact, I was with Gail Grossman, who's here with us tonight, and it's a good thing she wasn't standing next to me when I went to the back trying to find this book that was nudging me. I knew there was a book there for me somewhere, and stood there in front of the shelves just looking, which book is there for me? And many of you remember me telling this story. All of a sudden, the book moved. I remember turning to the side and saying, what did I just see? And I looked back thinking, I must be crazy. And it did it again. Now, those of you who have never heard me speak before at this time may be saying, oh boy, I didn't know what I was getting into this evening. This woman's a little crazy. Now she's hallucinating, right? Okay. So some of you may be wondering, okay, are these stories true or is she making this stuff up? Well, I went to speak at a conference of the Academy of Spiritual and Consciousness Studies, and I gave the talk about Wolf. And a man came up to me afterwards. He said, I'm here with a friend of mine. He's an engineer. And he turned to me and he said, do you think those stories she's telling are really true? Did they really happen to her? And I looked at the man and I said, look, you can only take my word for it. That's all you have to go on. And I wasn't offended at all because I know that I always test people. I feel it in my heart. Are they telling the truth or not? But I can tell you that I wouldn't be here today if I didn't play by the rules. I wouldn't have been in the role that I was in with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff if I didn't play by the rules. I mean, this man asked me to be his aide. He didn't go through a selection process. This is the highest ranking officer in the United States military, and he asked me to be his aide. Why? Because he trusted me to tell him stories as they really happened. He trusted me to tell the truth. Now I ask you, would you BS this man? You know, there is a greater reality, and the beautiful part is once you're open to interacting with that reality, there is no need to embellish the stories. I know that many of you here have had your own personal experiences, and I invite you to share them with those you will meet here. That's why I had to wear name tags. There's something about wearing name tags that opens you up to approaching somebody else. So if you just have to share your story, talk about them on the breaks. But there's a reason that I don't embellish them. Several reasons. Number one, because I would never want to tarnish the memory of those who passed, like my Susan. This work that I do as a medium honors them, honors their memory and the fact that they're still here. And also because the evidence that we get from the other side is so good, there's no need to stretch the truth. So you're not going to hear any embellishment this evening. But a little caveat. When I was asked to go do a session with my team in spirit down at First Unity, St. Petersburg, some of you have come up from that area. You may remember you may know Temple Hayes. She was the one that invited me to come down there and let Spirit speak through me. And I said, you know, Temple, some really, really heavy hitters have been coming through when I channel lately, and I cannot guarantee you what's going to happen when I go into that meditative state. Some people may be uncomfortable with that. And she looked at me and she said, Suzanne, if you're not making some people squirm, you're not doing your job. Whoa, okay. That, I was always a pleaser. Any pleasers in the audience? And I wasn't uncomfortable making people uncomfortable. But now I realize, well, that's your path. If the stories that I tell you tonight make you uncomfortable, I ask you to look at why that is. Because there is nothing behind any of this but love and connection. So don't take my word for it. This is what Einstein says. There remains something subtle, intangible, and inexplicable. Veneration for this force beyond anything that we can comprehend is my religion. So I'm going to share with you stories tonight that some people would call paranormal. It's funny, my sister came to visit a couple weeks ago, and my brother introduced her to one of his neighbors, and he says, oh, this is my sister Janice. She's the normal one. I said, Brent? And he said, no. I said, my other sister's the paranormal one. Okay. So there are acronyms to describe paranormal experiences, and some of you are familiar with them. We talk about NDEs. Those are near-death experiences. We talk about people who have had spiritually transformative experiences, and we call them STEs. Many of you have had those. It's perhaps sitting in meditation and something happens that you can't explain. You go to the other side without having to die. I know that's happened to me at least 4 times. And I remember sobbing and saying, why would anyone come back except to serve? Okay, so we have NDEs, STEs, then we have out-of-body experiences, right? Those are called OBEs. Well, for the stories I'm going to share with you this evening, I have coined a new acronym. If you know anything about military officers, we love our acronyms. And tonight what I'm going to share with you, I have called these stories NOEs. You know what that is? No other explanation. There is no other explanation than that there is a greater reality, and we are part of it. It becomes very easy to understand then, once you accept that there is a greater reality, how it is that a book can appear to move. It's because we all have this instrument in our head that some of you call a brain, but I call a frequency analyzer. And it's that little computer in your head that makes you accept that what you see and sense with your other senses is the only thing that's real. But if you can get that brain out of the way, then reality takes on a whole new meaning. And I understood when that book moved exactly what was going on, and it became even more clear to me when I attended a conference and I got to sit in this little virtual reality booth where they put gloves on my hand to change the tactile inputs coming into my hands. They put goggles on my face so that what I was seeing changed completely. Headphones on my ears so that what came in through my ears changed. Well, guess what? Reality changed. You shut out the reality around you like we can do in meditation, and you enter into a whole other reality. So I've pictured when that book moved, it's kind of like when I give readings and I feel physical symptoms of those who have passed. How does that happen? I believe that higher consciousness is changing, altering the frequency of the input that's coming into this frequency analyzer, my brain. For instance, the other day, given a reading, I suddenly got a sharp pain back here, and I said, ooh, that's the kidney. Your husband had a kidney problem. Oh yes, that's how he died. I become like a human pincushion in readings. And it's okay, because as soon as I feel it and I report it, it goes away. But if the client, the sitter, doesn't know what I'm talking about, they will keep prodding me. I've told some of you about the time when I was sitting with a woman who'd lost her husband, and suddenly I went, ow! I just got a piercing pain through my left eye. Not just stabbing, not aching, but piercing. I said, this is your husband. And he's telling me that that problem affected him for his whole life. And she said, when he was 14 years old, he was shot in the eye with a BB and blinded in that eye. So how does that work? Well, I see my team in spirit sitting there with a man who was shot in the eye by a BB, and they go through this is tongue-in-cheek, please. They go through their little manual, and they go, piercing pain in the eye. Oh, yes, that's frequency 101.3. And they dial it up, and the medium goes, ow! So it's just a matter of manipulating frequency, you see? The point of all of this is, don't be fooled by what your brain tells you. It's very real to us here, but it's not the only reality. So, if you think it is, then you are stuck in a box. And I'm here to take the lid off the box tonight. So I'm going to give you these little reality checks throughout this presentation and throughout tomorrow as well, to keep reminding you this is not the only reality. All right? So reality is different for all creatures depending on how their frequency analyzer works, how fast it operates, how slow the neurons fire. For example, you see fluorescent lights in this room. If there were a bumblebee in this room, that bee, if it could communicate with you, would say, you think that's a solid stream of light, don't you? Well, I see it as a strobe light, because that light is actually strobing really fast. But our brain can't detect that, so it comes out as one solid light to us. But the bee sees it differently. Or how about dogs? You think they hear sounds that we don't necessarily hear? Absolutely. How about the dog's vision? We think everybody sees the world as we do, right? Well, I sent off to a veterinary ophthalmologist to see what a dog sees. This is pixelated, so it should be clear. It's the colors we're looking at here. This is how a dog sees the world. So imagine saying to a dog, there are colors so much more vibrant than any you've ever seen. What are they going to say? You're crazy, right? But here's how we see the same scene. Put the two next to each other, and you can understand then when I do a reading and somebody says to me from the other side, there are colors here more beautiful than you can imagine. Well, we can't imagine, but we can open our brain to that possibility, right? When you open your mind to greater realities, that's when miracles happen. And I know a lot of you have heard my definition of a miracle. It's when the two worlds come together in a way that we perceive that interaction. So it's not magic, it's just a sign to us that there is another level of reality operating here and hopefully helping us for the greater good. My example comes from a story I read in one of Deepak Chopra's book about imagining a snail sitting on a table looking at an apple. Now, whereas the bumblebee's brain worked really rapidly, a snail's brain works as slow as the rest of them, okay? So it takes a snail 3 full seconds to perceive anything. If we turn on a light, we see that light go on right away. But a snail would be in the dark for 3 seconds and he'd realize something's different. So imagine you have a snail looking at this apple. And in less than 3 seconds, in just 1 second, a hand reaches in and takes that apple away. What did the snail see? Well, nothing. Because 1 second, the apple's there. And the next second, it's gone. To the snail, it's a miracle, right? But we know differently because we have the bigger picture, like our helpers in the spirit world. And they often know that what we call a miracle is just that helping hand from the spirit world reaching in to help us. But we can't see it, so we call it magic. I call it no other explanation than that there is a greater reality. There's a paradox here when it comes to understanding the greater reality. And that is, you can't experience the greater reality with the side of you that's human, the brain and your whole operating system that uses the senses to sense reality. You just can't do it. So you have to accept that there's a part of you that is not physical. You see? You have to get outside of the box just to experience that greater reality. And that can be challenging. So the key is to acknowledge that your intellect, your mind, can only take you so far. And then you have to get outside of this mentality that it's either human or spirit. I'm going to really hammer this point home this weekend, that we are both human and spirit at the same time. And that makes all the difference, realizing that we're not just here in human form and then we die and we go to the spirit world. We are souls here and now, which is how the soul often leaves us signs that it knows it's going to pass. The two worlds may seem very different, but they're actually all of one great whole, the formless and the formed, the eternal and the temporary. Your human side is the temporary side. The spirit side is eternal, with you before you came here and long after you leave here, eternal. But the thing is, they make up one great big reality that you are a part of now. So I have this little model that I developed that shows the physical world down at the bottom, where we have plants, rocks, animals, and then we move up the scale of consciousness to the human level. We're all familiar with interacting on that level. I've already shared stories with you of interacting with the spirit world, with those who've passed to the other side, and then your guides would be a little higher up. And I'm going to share with you examples tonight of interacting with the masters at the highest levels. But really, the biggest message here is that it's all just one mind, all right? And that one mind, that divine intelligence, that infinite source of love, manifests in infinite numbers of ways. It manifests as beautiful mountains. It manifests as beautiful flowers and even weeds. It manifests as babies that always make us smile because they're so pure. It manifests as you and me. It manifests as those in spirit in a world we can't imagine. All expressions of the divine. The all that is appeared to Christians early in this era as Jesus. The all that is appeared as the voice of Muhammad in the 7th century. The all that is appeared to Hindus as the characters in the Vedas. The all that is appeared to Buddhists as Gautama Siddhartha. Is the all limited to a few select beings, or is it being itself? That's the point that I want to make this evening. The great field of love manifests in limitless ways, and you are part of that. You are an aspect of that. You cannot be separated from that. I have the greatest aha to share with you tomorrow to show you how you are part of all that is. For now, we can experience that when we get into an expanded state through meditation. But tomorrow, I'm going to show you how to get into that state just walking around with your eyes open so you can be in a constant state of meditation. How does that sound? Sounds good, huh? Okay. So when I began speaking with loved ones who had passed to the other side, I thought I had taken the lid off the box. I want to make sure everybody here understands that I did not know that I had this ability when I was in the Navy. This is all new since I retired. I didn't know there was a greater reality, and certainly to be able to communicate with those who have passed was nothing that had ever entered even my wildest imagination. So to talk to loved ones who've passed, so I realized though, when I started getting signs from the other side, that there were other levels to that box. Kind of like nested boxes, right? Not just loved ones who had passed, but as we mentioned, multiple levels, dimensions upon dimensions. I do just want to diverge a bit to that dimension down here with the loved ones on the other side. If any of you follow my Facebook page, you saw a post last week about a reading that I did that got me so excited. So many people who are skeptical say, well, maybe you're just reading your client's mind. I know that's not so from stories just like this one. I was sitting with a woman named Jean Marie, who's allowed me to share her story this evening, and her mother came through and mentioned a piece of jewelry, and I said, it looks like she's showing me a ring. And she said, no, I don't have my mother's ring, I have her necklace. And I said, well, that's really off. I normally see that very clearly. And she said, well, that necklace has been missing for years, and I'm so upset about it. And I suddenly saw a golden opportunity to make up for my flub here. I said, let me ask your mom where that necklace is, because I know that mom's right here. So silently I said, where's the necklace? And I looked and I said, your mother says it's in a box, she went like this, in a drawer. And right away my brain says, my left brain says, well, if it's in a box in a drawer, she would have found it by now, right? But I said, you go home and you look for it, and let me know when you find it. And 3 days later, there came the email. And she said, Suzanne, I was so nervous. I've been through those drawers over and over, but this time I reached way in the back, and there was this little box that you see there. She opened it up from that drawer, and there was Mom's necklace. Mom knew where it was all along. Just had to have the ability to hear from her. So I love that. That's not telepathy. The daughter had no idea where it was. So we communicate with loved ones who have passed. And how many of you have been in a session, how many have not been in a session when I bring through my group called Sanaya? Oh, wonderful. So you'll have a new experience tomorrow night. But Sanaya is the group of guides who help me with every challenge that I have. I just turn to them because it's like Einstein said, no challenge can ever be solved at the level at which it originated. And where are all of our problems? Right here. So you go to somebody that has the bigger picture, and I turn to Sanaya. When they first started coming through to me, I said, what do I call you? And they said to call them Sanaya, which I looked up, and it meant eminent, distinguished, and of the gods. Well, that's a great name. It's a Sanskrit name. But my dear friend Carolyn here this evening gave me a big shock last year when she said, Suzanne, I found out that Sanaya has a different name. It's an Arabic name for flash of lightning. Ooh. Now, how's that for a group of guides for somebody who has lost a stepdaughter to a flash of lightning and wrote a book about a guy who was killed by a flash of lightning? Do you think there are coincidences at work here? Well, Sanaya gives me beautiful messages every day that thousands are reading now, and it's just so heartwarming because their messages speak straight to the heart. And I know that's not me talking when they speak through me. And as you'll get that experience tomorrow night, I won't go into them too much, but they give us beautiful evidence that they're really here. One of the best examples most recently was when a woman raised her hand in a smaller group and asked a personal question about her daughter's health. She said that her daughter was having some coughing issues and some bronchitis, I think it was. And as Sanaya was speaking, they interrupted her and said, diabetes. Your daughter has diabetes. When Sanaya's coming through me, I'm sitting in the background listening and thinking, this woman was talking about bronchitis. Now they're talking about diabetes. The very next day, the daughter called her mother and said, Mom, I had blood work done because of my cough. You're not going to believe it. I have diabetes. So the spirit world knew all about it. I love that validation that our helpers always know what's going on with us. If we can surrender our identification and our focus on this reality, we can get that kind of information at the level where we're all connected. So once I took the lid off the box and started talking to higher guides, I began to wonder just how high we could go. And those of you on the spiritual path, I know you're like me. You get drawn to all these books and new things you never would have read before. And I was raised in a family with one parent who was an agnostic and one who was an atheist. No religious background at all, which to me actually now I find is a gift because I was able to do my own searching without anybody telling me what to believe. I go with how my heart feels, how it feels inside. Is it all about love? Is there any fear here? And so I've developed my own spirituality, and some of the books that I was drawn to were allegedly channeled by Jesus. Now this is interesting for me because I don't have any formal training in the Bible. I know about Jesus what any American would know growing up here, the stories, the Christmas stories and basic stories, but nothing strictly by the Bible. Yet I started reading A Course in Miracles a little bit. That really spoke to my heart, and that was allegedly channeled from Jesus. And then there was this other book that talked about Yeshua by a man named Mark Hammer. And Mark described himself a lot like me, wondering, how is this happening to me that higher beings are talking through me? And sitting on my living room couch, I felt a little like Mark Hammer, and I thought, okay, well, he kind of put this to the test. Why don't I see if I can connect with Jesus? I wasn't going to tell anybody that I was doing this. I was very uncomfortable about it at the time. But I got in that nice expanded state that I'm going to show you how to get into tomorrow. and I set the intention of connecting with the consciousness of Jesus. And I felt this presence step in that was just overwhelmingly loving, very powerful. I was glad I was sitting on the couch so I wouldn't fall off a chair. It was amazing. And you know, I know that those on the other side don't mind when we ask for evidence. So I said, if this is really Jesus, would you give me a Bible verse that's relevant to you visiting me now? That's what Mark Hammer did in his book. And I thought it was brilliant, especially for me, who had only breezed through a Bible once or twice. No more than an hour had I ever spent with a Bible. And the second I asked that question, I heard clear as day, Thessalonians 1, 2:13. Just then, Ty, my husband, walked into the living room, and the energy dissipated, and I turned to him and I said, Ty, what's Thessalonians? And he kind of looked shocked because a word like that had never come out of my mouth in the years that we've been together. And he said, Suzanne, it's a book in the Bible. And I said, we got to find my Bible. And we went, and I had this study Bible, dusted it off, and sure enough, there it is. And we leafed through to Thessalonians 2:13, and here's what it says. When you received the word of God, which you heard from us, you accepted it not as a human word, but as it actually is, the word of God, which is indeed at work in you who believe. Now, I asked to believe that this was really Jesus, and those words spoke to me. This is the word of God, if you believe. That's how I translated that. And I thought, wow, that's pretty awesome. And then I got on my computer and Googled, how many verses are in the Bible? 33,000 verses. And the one I get was not just any verse. And then I started leafing through the Bible, putting my finger down, and some of them were so irrelevant to anything. But this one really spoke to me. And then I heard, sit with me and I will talk with you. So I moved to the room where I give my readings, really good energy in there, and invited him back in. And here comes that presence again. And without even asking for a Bible verse, I heard Corinthians 2:14. And then I write, as I've learned to write Sanaya's words, in that expanded state, as who I believed was Jesus talking to me, said, blessings be upon you. 1 Corinthians. The words you find will speak to you. Trust them when they speak to the heart. Okay? So after that loving energy faded away, I pull out the Bible again. And here's 1 Corinthians 2:14. And the words are, in that verse, the person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness and cannot understand them because they are discerned only through the Spirit. If you look at those two Bible verses, they're saying the same thing. You have to trust the words in your heart, which is what Jesus said to me even when I wasn't looking at the Bible. Otherwise, you think they're foolishness. It's like that paradox I explained earlier. You can't believe these things if you're using your human mind. How is this possible that a man that walked this earth 2,000 years ago is speaking to me? And why would he speak to me? Isn't that a very human reaction? He would speak to any of us because we are the same loving energy that he is. And that's the message. So I thought that was pretty cool. 2 relevant verses, and then no visits for about 3 weeks. That was the end of that, or so I thought. Ty and I were getting ready to go to Key West for a month. We're loading the car, getting ready to go, and I hear a voice. I hear lots of voices. And this one says, get Joel Goldsmith's little book. It's that specific. And I had probably 10 Joel Goldsmith books. Who's read his work? Just a few? You should try it. Good stuff. Well, I knew the little book. It's this one. It's called The Infinite Way. But I hadn't seen it in 5 years. I have shelves and shelves of books at home, and I had not looked at that book in 5 years. So I'm looking, and Ty's getting ready, and I couldn't find it. So I said, I better go. I start going out to the car, and I hear, get Joel Goldsmith's little book. Okay. So I said, Ty, I'll be right back. And I go back, and I go through all the shelves of books again. Couldn't find it. And I said, I gotta go. And I go out, and I'm about to get in the car, and Ty's by this time, tapping the fingers on the wheel. And this time it was a do not miss this opportunity feeling. Go back and look one more time. 3 times I go back and I found the book. I go running out to the car, threw it in my bag, and we start going down the highway. So we've been gone, maybe driving 2 hours, and I hear, look at the book. I open it up, and I'm a highlighter, and I underline. So I just start reading the parts that I've underlined 5 years ago, and I hear, no, start at the very beginning and read every word. You can't get guidance that clearly, okay? Set that as your intention. Okay, well, I've learned, follow orders. So I start at the beginning, and I get to page 27, and there's a couple lines there that sounded really familiar to me, but where had I read those words? Here's a page out of Joel Goldsmith's Infinite Way. I've circled it. He wrote, "But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned." Now, that may sound familiar to you because you just heard something like that about 5 minutes ago, but it was 3 weeks for me since I heard those words, so I wasn't quite sure, and I couldn't be sure. Why? This is very important. Notice here, for the skeptics who might think, well, you remembered that from that book. This was 5 years earlier I had read it, and Goldsmith broke a prime rule of writing. Look at this. He did put quotation marks, no footnote, no reference. Okay? Not good. So you can't tell that that's a Bible verse. For all I know, who's he quoting? So I just marked that page 27, and I keep reading. I turn one page, I turn another page. I get to page 29. 2 pages later, there are no more quotes between that last one and this one. And here's a quote. "When you received the word of God, which ye heard of us, you received it not as the word of men, but as it is in truth, the word of God, which effectively works also in you who believe." And I thought, wait a minute. Now look, no reference to a Bible, no footnote, back-to-back quotes in this book. And I thought, no way. Now, I didn't have internet on my phone at the time, so I get to where we're going in Key West. The first thing I do is plug in my computer, get on the internet, and I Google those 2 Bible verses that were given to me when I asked Jesus to be present with me. And then this voice says, look in that book. You already know the punchline, don't you? Those 2 verses in Goldsmith's book were 1 Corinthians 2:14 and Thessalonians 2:13. What was it that Jesus said to me when I wrote down his words that day? He said, trust the words you hear when they speak to the heart. I turned the page in the book, and Goldsmith said the same thing. Trust the words when they speak to your heart. I walked around Key West in a daze. Why? Because for me, there was no other explanation than that the consciousness of Jesus, the soul of that great teacher, that model of loving compassion for all of us, of course, is eternal, just like you are, cannot die, and is everywhere, and time doesn't exist. So who is it you want to connect with? You are that same energy. Why can't you connect with that? How do we do that? I did it with belief, and I set the intention, and I invited it in. And it happened. And because I believed, it led to greater and greater experiences. Tomorrow, I'm going to teach you the step-by-step method that I go through to attune. There's no secrets. Good stuff. So there was no other explanation for me than that there is a God. But it's not some being that we can put in a box. It's this force, this source of that love that I felt when he stepped into my energy field. It's all that is. It's infinitely intelligent, and it is love. And it's not a being. It just is. And we're part of that. I mean, that's exactly what Goldsmith said. He said, how often do we go on the rocks on this point? How frequently do we attempt to understand spiritual wisdom with our human intellect? And that shuts out these beautiful experiences that all of us can have up until I discovered there was a greater reality, this kind of experience for me would not have been even in my imagination. It's like people who have children, and they say, well, you just can't imagine what it's like until you have children. I only have 2 little puppies, so I can't imagine that kind of maternal bond. I have it with my dogs, but I can't imagine what it's like to be a mother. Well, until you've touched that reality that's beyond this one, until you've sat in the presence of Jesus in your energy field, maybe it's hard to imagine. So do it. Invite it in. Tonight is about opening your mind that I'm no more special than anybody. I've just opened my mind. I climbed out of that box. I took the lid off. Are you ready to do that? You want to have these awesome experiences? This is not just storytelling. I'm here to show you that this is available to you, to everybody. Everybody. And it's awesome.